Socialism, the monster hiding under America's bed.
The reason why people view socialism as the monster hiding under people's bed is because of what recorded history has already proved to us. In other words, it's not like we haven't got the evidence of the failure of socialism. It's not only failed in the likes of the Soviet Union or, Mao's China. And you could go on about the millions of people that it left to starve and the millions it had killed, but even if you try to paint socialism within the context of the Scandinavian economies, those economies had failed, and you'd only have to look at the likes of Sweden as an example of that.
Our chupacabra, our Candyman. Say it 3 times into a mirror and your kid goes to college for free.
The problem with this word free is it's grossly misunderstood by a lot of people. They do not understand that in Great Britain, and I have lived through this era of the free education, of the so-called free tuition fees that people boast off about in terms of university. They boast off about, the free healthcare. However, at the same time, they contradict themselves by complaining about the costs of goods and services, such as the costs of living. That includes, of course, the costs of their food and drink, the costs just to drive about in the road, such as your road tax, etc. You see, this is what people don't really understand, is that the government cannot give to you without taking from another first. And what that simply means is that it doesn't just take from you in terms of tax money. That's not the only way that the government pays for the things like your universal healthcare or your universal education, such as your free education and your free healthcare. It doesn't just take it from tax money, it takes it from other areas of the economy. So whilst it can give to you, it cannot give to you without taking from another first. It has to take from another area of the economy. Now this is the special part, because a lot of people don't seem to understand this, because these people complain about the cutbacks. They complain about people getting paid off. They complain about wages being driven down. They complain about the higher inflation. They complain about many things. They could even complain about the higher interest rates. But this is the issue, because people want their cake and they want to eat it too. And you can't have your cake and you can't eat it too. You can't have both. In other words, it's a bit like this thing with the higher tax rates. People want their higher tax rates, but for some strange reason they want their lower cost of living at the same time. You can't have two at the same time. You either have one or the other, and that's just the way things are in economics, and people don't understand this. So whenever you hear this rhetoric about how the NHS is more affordable, it never was more affordable. It's a great deal more expensive. You just don't see it because it's a hidden cost. And where's that hidden cost? Well, it doesn't just come from the taxpayer. I mean, it costs 120 odd billion pounds alone from the taxpayer per year. That's the taxpayer. We're not even talking about going into the other areas. And for example, how you would pay for the NHS in Great Britain is through greatly increasing your interest rates. It could mean that, and we have actually seen this recently. We saw a raise in student loan in terms of the interest rates for that type of stuff. I mean, it's crazy, because you see your road tax going up. You see the gas and electricity prices go up. You see food prices. You see, all of these things in your everyday living. The inflation, it drives up, and that's how you pay for it. You essentially pay for it out of other areas of the economy. So another way you would pay for it is through reducing, your college and university placements. Another way you would pay for it is seeing a higher unemployment rate. In other words, people being paid off in the name of paying for it. It could mean, cutbacks to things within the education system, because I remember when I was going through my college course in photography, there was basically cutbacks happening within the college, such as we wouldn't have the luxury to go abroad on some trip. So they cut the funding for these type of things, but that's essentially it. People don't realise, but that's where the money comes from to pay for those things. It's not a case of, oh well, we can just throw money like there's no tomorrow, and we can just have all our trips and and all the rest of it. But at the same time, we'll have our so-called free healthcare and education, because money has to come from somewhere to pay for it all. And that's essentially where it comes from. It comes from out of the other areas where people are complaining about. So when people complain about the cutbacks to maybe the staff, when people complain about the higher costs of goods and services, this is because part of that, people are paying out higher tax rates, such as business owners, etc., in order to pay for things like that. And it in turn, it reduces your productivity level, because businesses may have to cut back because they cannot afford, so that they don't produce as much. And when you do not produce as much in the laws of supply and demand, the less that you produce, the higher the cost of those goods and services would be. There's many factors that go into it, but essentially all you have to understand is that nothing is free. It's a hidden cost. And unfortunately, when you talk about the NHS, the so-called free education system, the free tuition of universities in Scotland, all of that comes at a dear cost. And yes, we can see from Scotland, it having the largest deficit in Europe, as well, of course, the very fact that within Scotland we've got a serious debt problem as it is. They like to pretend that it's not Scotland's, it's the United Kingdom's, as if to say Scotland is not complicit with the United Kingdom. I don't buy into that. And there's this other thing. Just overall, I mean, in terms of Scotland, I can give you a small example. When it came to me finishing off my study in photography and I had graduated, I did have the choice to go on and do the degree at university. I didn't, because it wouldn't be much point if I'm going to do social type photography and stuff like that. Anyway, the point being is the issue that the number of placements for each of those universities that were available for photography, you're talking about 11 places. That's how many placements are available for each university for that course for photography. 11 placements. There was only 11 placements for the City of Glasgow College. They do part with the University West of Scotland. I think there was 11 placements for the one in Edinburgh. In fact, 2 of them in Edinburgh. There's I think about 11 placements for the one in Aberdeen and things like that. And you then have to take into consideration the amount of people who, are chasing, that one course, the one degree for that course. And there's a lot of people. Now, the problem is you think, oh well, that's fine, we can get by with that. Yes, it might seem good in hindsight, but see, behind closed doors, behind what you can't really see in the background, there are cutbacks that take place as a result in order to make space to afford that so-called free tuition fee. And this is what a lot of people don't get. And that's why when you see people complain about higher costs of living, but at the same time they want their free goods, you can't have both. That's essentially why people struggle to get by, because of that. It's a hidden cost, and it never was free. You're just paying for it out of another area of your living, basically. So I hope that clears that.